Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock, so we're ready to get started. So welcome and good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in today for this webinar about the Ontario Active School Travel Fund. Please use the chat box for any questions that you have. You're welcome to type those in as we go along through the webinar. And we have time for lots of questions and answers towards the end of this session. My name is Kate Berry, and I'm the Programme Director for Ontario Active School Travel at Green Communities Canada. I'm grateful to be supported in giving this webinar by my colleague, Selena Churo, our Project Coordinator. So welcome from both of us. Ontario Active School Travel is a programme of Green Communities Canada. GCC, as we are known, is a federally incorporated nonprofit, and we work on a range of community-based initiatives in the fields of water, energy, and transportation. GCC has been a leading proponent of active school travel in Canada for over 20 years, and we do that through research, advocacy, training, programming. Our goal in this work is simple. We want to get more kids walking and wheeling for school journeys. The school journey is a really important opportunity for physical activity for our children, and for all of the health, environmental, and academic benefits that come with that. In 2018, we established the Ontario Active School Travel Programme as a provincial framework to get more kids walking and wheeling. The programme is managed by Green Communities Canada with financial support from the Government of Ontario's Ministry of Education. The objective of the programme, set by our provincial government, is to increase active school travel opportunities for elementary students in Ontario. The Ministry of Education has stated two key drivers for this objective. Firstly, to prepare students for learning. And in providing this financial support, the Ministry is recognizing the important correlation between physical activity, student well-being, and academic performance for students. And the second driver is to improve safety in our school zones by reducing traffic and congestion. The OAST program is the first example of a provincial framework for active school travel in Canada. And I'm pleased to report that it has already had an influence on activity elsewhere in Canada. Last year, we were approached by British Columbia Ministry of Transportation staff who were interested in the Ontario model. And since then, they have moved to establish a program in their province. So as a result, BC Healthy Communities has been appointed to develop a pilot program that will support active school travel for BC schools, and they have directly borrowed and adapted content from the Ontario Active School Travel program. So we're really pleased to be part of this cross-country collaboration, and we look forward to seeing how things go out west. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to provide an overview of the fund and look at who is eligible to apply, the criteria that applicants need to meet, and the types of initiatives that are priority areas for the fund. I will then hand over to Selena, who will walk through the application form and look at the type of information required. We have time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please submit your questions in the chat box and send to everyone. We will be monitoring the chat box and collating questions so that we can work through those at the end. And then we will update the frequently asked questions on our website after this webinar if there's any sort of new content that comes up through our discussion. And we'll also be posting a recording of this webinar online so that you can revisit the content after today. The Ontario Active School Travel Fund supports initiatives that will have a significant and lasting impact in their communities. The funding can be used to expand and strengthen existing initiatives or to establish new initiatives in communities that have not previously implemented active school travel programming. Round 3 of the fund offers grants of up to $60,000 to support active school travel programming in Ontario communities, focused on elementary age students from grade kindergarten through to 8. The distribution of these funds is application-based. So that means that it is a competitive process and the applications received are screened, assessed, and ranked. The first and second rounds of the OAST fund saw $2.1 million distributed to 28 projects across the province over the past 2 years. We are just now in the process of wrapping up those projects and completing final evaluation of the impacts and achievements. The 28 funded projects have implemented over 140 initiatives in their communities. And this chart you see on the screen gives an overview of the main types of activities happening as a result of the fund. You can find out more about who and what was involved in these initiatives by looking through the project sheets that are available on our website. So on the Ontario Active School Travel Fund webpage, you can access the project sheets just here, the list of projects, and we're currently updating these profile sheets, and we'll also be adding a matrix chart as a directory that will help you search projects by types of activities. So that will help you zone in on the projects of most interest or relevance to your own community and ideas. So look out for those updated information materials appearing on the fund webpage in the next few days. Applications for this third round of funding must be submitted by 5 p.m. on Friday, the 20th of November, 2020. The assessment of applications will occur immediately, so we expect funding decisions to be made by mid-December, ready for the award of funds to successful projects in January 2021. Projects need to be getting underway by the end of February 2021. So it's really important to develop a project plan that can meet this timeline. We want projects to get up and running quickly and efficiently in order to make the most of the 18 months of implementation available. It's important that if you are going to be selecting schools to participate in your project, that you do that early by shortlisting schools at the application stage. The review panel for the applications will want to see that you already have a clear idea of where you are going to be focusing effort if your application is successful. And they want to see that you have a solid plan for how participating schools will be selected. And that's something we can provide you with further guidance on if you need it. Overall, it's up to you to decide how to distribute your project activities over the implementation phase. You may have different phases of work with different levels of intensity over those 18 months. And whilst projects can run until June 2022, grant recipients will be required to submit a final progress report to GCC in March of that year, as that aligns with our reporting deadlines to the Ministry of Education. So the fund targets initiatives operating at a community or regional scale. Funds will not be awarded to individual schools. Applicants should decide the types and locations for their initiatives and operate at a scale that is appropriate for an efficient and effective implementation. The important requirement is that regardless of the scale and distribution, that you have municipal and school board support. And also that you must ensure that the project scope is explained and justified in the application form. This funding is designed to support a range of projects across Ontario and avoid concentration in any one location. Therefore, only one application can be accepted per community. And for the purpose of this fund, we are defining community as a lower tier or single tier municipal area. So for example, we can only accept one application from the City of Kingston municipal area or one application from the Town of Milton municipal area. Any application should be developed in consultation with the key regional stakeholders to ensure there is no duplication or overlap between applications at the local level. So the eligibility criteria for this funding seeks to generate conversation and collaboration between stakeholders at the application stage. So who can apply to the fund? Well, the lead applicant must be one of these 5 groups: municipality, school board, nonprofit corporation, public health, or student transportation consortia. A common question we have received already for round 3 is, can previous OAST fund recipients apply? The answer to this question depends on the community or communities being supported by the proposed project. So for the purpose of this fund, as I said, a community is defined as a single tier or lower tier municipal area. An organization can apply and receive funds from more than one round of funding, but the community that is benefiting from the investment must be different each time. So we have an example here on the screen to illustrate this criteria. Leeds Grenville District Health Unit is a previous recipient, and they could apply to round 3, provided that their proposed project is not located in any of the 4 communities that were supported by the fund in previous rounds. So I hope that gives a clear definition of that criteria. So what makes for a strong application? We are looking for initiatives that show relevant and lasting impact, particularly initiatives that have innovative approaches to the challenges and barriers to active school travel. Think about how your initiative will fill gaps and address needs within the community, and how will target audiences be engaged effectively. A key objective of the fund is to support lasting impact. So what plans are in place to support long-term shifts from passive to active travel beyond the lifespan of your project? We are also interested in the capacity of both the lead applicant and the project team. We are looking for strong skills there, the knowledge and experience in delivering this type of initiative, and the knowledge and experience of delivering programs in the proposed community. Those are going to be key strengths. Thinking more about achieving lasting impact. The OAST fund supports projects that seek to build community capacity, and that's a key part of fostering those long-term commitments. That requires a comprehensive approach, and we see there being 2 key ingredients to achieving this. Firstly, initiatives should involve multiple stakeholders. Obviously, there are those organizations that can be a lead applicant, municipality, public health, school board, student transportation consortia. But it's also about engaging and involving the schools themselves, the staff, the students, the parents, as well as police, bylaw, youth services, and other key stakeholders in the local community. It's very much a broad group of stakeholders who have a role in this work. And the second ingredient is that it needs to be combined with initiatives and approaches that address all of the 5 E's: education, encouragement, engineering, enforcement, and evaluation. It's not just about educating students and families about the benefits of active school travel and encouraging them to use active modes. It's also about changing our built environment and how it is managed to support active transportation, plus combining that with data collection, monitoring, and evaluation to track progress and assess impact. The Ontario Active School Travel Fund supports initiatives that focus on these 4 priority areas. Firstly, school travel planning. Second, strengthening stakeholder partnerships, collaboration, and coordination. Thirdly, developing policy and procedures. And fourth, building public and political support. I'm going to look at each of these in more detail in a moment, but overall, we encourage you to develop proposals that address all 4 of these priority areas. The coverage of these priority areas will be taken into account when evaluating all applications received. And initiatives that address all 4 of these priority areas will be more competitive in the application process. So school travel planning is a priority area for this fund because it is a proven comprehensive process that addresses all 5 E's to increase rates of active and sustainable transport for school journeys. Education and encouragement activities are combined with engineering to improve the built environment, enforcement to improve driver and pedestrian behaviors, and evaluation to measure the change that is achieved. School travel planning brings together individual schools with local stakeholders. Together, they identify barriers to walking and cycling at the school and in the neighborhood, and then they develop and implement an action plan to begin addressing those barriers. Activities that can be funded include hiring facilitators to implement the STP process, or continuation and development of existing school travel planning, or implementation of actions in existing school travel plans that have already been developed. If you are not already familiar with school travel planning, you can find extensive resources on our website, including the School Travel Planning Toolkit. The second priority area is strengthening stakeholder partnerships, collaboration, and coordination. And this is important because we know that through collaboration, we can achieve greater things. We can leverage and share resources, we can use our collective resources more efficiently, and we are more likely to see sustained programming if we have strong working relationships between stakeholders. So you can see here the kind of activities supported by the fund, including developing and strengthening a committee that coordinates active school travel initiatives, securing greater stakeholder commitment and buy-in. An example of that is by developing an active school travel charter, and really working to strengthen the links between a lot of the existing initiatives in our community, between schools and community partners, and help people to access programming that already exists and expand what's available. The third priority is developing policy and procedures. And this is another key part of creating that framework for long-term lasting impact. All grant recipients will be required to conduct an environmental policy scan as part of the project, which will help to build a picture of the policy landscape and how that is being developed and changed across the province. Key policy initiatives that could be supported by the fund include the examination of existing policies and how they are being implemented, identifying opportunities for how policies could be improved to better support active school travel. So we're thinking particularly things like winter maintenance, student transportation policy, and school siting and design. And finally, our fourth priority area is building public and political support. This could be a key focus of your initiative, or it could be woven throughout your project activities. The goal is to raise awareness through events, campaigns, and media activity. All grant recipients will be required to organize a launch event to generate media interest. So that is one way that this priority area can be addressed, but we'll also be looking to see that there will be mechanisms within your proposal for sharing news and information with stakeholders and target audiences, and for storytelling and celebrating successes and progress achieved by the project. In addition to dollars, grant recipients will receive learning supports from Green Communities Canada. We are really very committed to supporting the success of your projects. I mentioned that we have an extensive STP toolkit online, and we are also able to provide training, coaching, and mentoring support, particularly for school travel planning. We provide advice and guidance overall for project delivery, and we coordinate regular gatherings for grant recipients. So there's lots of opportunity for peer-to-peer support and knowledge sharing between funded projects. We also host the OAST network, which is an online community of practice for any practitioners who are involved in active school travel. The network currently has around 100 members, and we encourage representatives from funded projects to join this forum and contribute to the discussion. Now, we know that we are seeking to fund projects during an uncertain time, and we want to acknowledge some of the challenges that your project could face due to the coronavirus pandemic, and provide you with some guidance on how you might navigate those challenges. We know that we're operating in an atmosphere of uncertainty and stress, with a lot of variability in student enrollment at schools. We know that there are restrictions on in-school activities and that schools may be reluctant to take on new projects. And we know that principals and school board staff have less bandwidth to engage with active school travel meetings, decisions, activities, and also other stakeholders may have less capacity than usual to provide support. But we also know that walking and cycling are safe and healthy activities during this time, and that active school travel is important now more than ever for student well-being and safe school zones. We know that walking and wheeling to school can be done whilst adhering to physical distancing requirements. So the Ontario Active School Travel Council published guidelines recommending that active school travel should be intentionally promoted as the preferred travel mode for students. So as you put together a proposal, we encourage you to reference and use the Council's guidelines for safe, healthy school travel to help plan your project and make the case for active school travel to your project partners. You can find the guidelines on our website, and they're available in both French and English. So here's our key advice to you for planning your proposal. You need to design a project that will be resilient and adaptable. So firstly, be informed. Talk to your school boards and other partners. Understand their pressure points. Is there anything that's off the table for 2021-22 school year? Where do they most need help with supporting active travel and safe school zones? Secondly, spread the load. Try to share responsibility across more than one organization for the project. For example, 2 organizations co-leading a project has been a successful model in the past if their working relationships are good. Look at ways that you can share the workload, that you can play to strengths and cover gaps. Thirdly, expect change. Change is inevitable. So build flexibility into your plan. So perhaps rather than one single large activity, break it down into several smaller activities. Maybe that would be better, so that if one can't proceed, you still have other opportunities. Fourthly, go digital. Embrace online tools for engagement. In our own project work amongst GCC staff with schools, we are already seeing that school boards are encouraging online data collection for this school year more than they have in the past. And lastly, take a community-based approach. So we're saying, don't use the school as your primary communication channel. Broaden your reach by broadcasting messages community-wide through municipal and community networks. You don't want to be in a situation where the school administration and staff are the only way to get your message out, because they might not have capacity for that in the school year ahead. Okay, so just quickly to summarize how to apply before I hand over to Selena. The first step is to ensure that you register online with us at the Ontario Active School Travel Fund page. That will enable you to access the application form and submission portal page. Once you have the application form, you can start working to prepare your proposal. We recommend that you read the program guide and develop your proposal in discussion with your community partners. Applications will be submitted online, including the application form and the supporting budget, project, and evaluation plans. So I'll now hand over to Selena to walk us through the application form. So we're just going to switch over our screen sharing for a moment.
Thank you, Kate. I'm just going to share my screen now. All right. I will now walk everyone through the key 7 sections of the application form. Please note that there are character limits for each part, and be aware of our expectations for full sentences and paragraph structure in specific areas. As we go through the form, we will provide examples of questions that will guide the reviewers when rating your application. The project overview is where you will provide an overview of your proposed initiatives and where reviewers will form their first impression of your project. When evaluating this section, reviewers are looking whether your project is well-defined and whether it is clear how you will expand and strengthen active school travel or help to get a new program started in new communities. Identifying location and school boards involved is of interest to the Ministry of Education and suggests progress towards strengthening stakeholder partnerships, collaboration, and coordination. Reviewers are also looking for how you will address the priority areas Kate just mentioned in her previous slides. A strong application will generally link more than one priority area. Reviewers will be looking at whether each area has been effectively and adequately addressed. At a minimum, all communities will be contributing to developing policies and procedures that support active school travel through their environmental policy scan and building public and political support through holding a media launch. We are also looking at how your initiative differs from business as usual. Is your proposal innovative? Will it fill a gap previously noted within the community? 4 main target audiences must be engaged in your initiative. Will the target audiences like students, parents, teachers, and decision makers like elected officials be engaged effectively? How do you plan to increase the number of students that use active school travel? And are your responses to these questions realistic and linked to specific actions? That's what we are looking for in this section. Building the case. When you're building the case for your initiative and explaining how it is relevant to your community, you will need to cite the available research and policy work from your community. The evidence could come from reports, policies, and even school documents. In addition, it's helpful here to explain how your plans to increase active school travel links with what is already happening in the community. And once you have described what you plan to do, the next question gives you a chance to showcase what your organization has already done and convince the reviewers that you're capable and knowledgeable to work with partners on a community level project. The partnerships and community capacity, we need to know which organizations will be involved in delivering the program, specific members who will be involved, and their roles. Following this, you have the opportunity to show reviewers how the knowledge, skills, and experience of your team members will lead to successful program delivery. Majority of this section consists of checkbox typed close-ended questions. And your responses will help us know how far along you are in formalizing a culture of active school travel in your community. A final open-ended question in this section asks about informal partners or collaboration on active school travel or active transportation initiatives. For those with existing stakeholder committees, we want to know how informal or new partners may support the initiative. And for those without a committee in place, for example, communities new to active school travel, we would like to hear about how informal collaborations can sufficiently support the proposal and whether you plan to formalize the committee. The last part of this section is where you will list each municipality and school board that has committed to support the initiative. These partners must be aware of your proposal and ready to help get the project up and running in early January 2021. As a minimum, you need to have the support of at least 1 school board and 1 municipality. Letters of support are not required at the application stage, but will be required as part of a funding agreement should your application be successful. For your project budget, reviewers will be looking at whether the requested funding is justified and whether sources are adequately described. This fund aims to incentivize stakeholders to bring forward new and additional contributions that will support active school travel through matching contributions. Although there are some restrictions in terms of project expenses, this section is fairly open and can be tailored for your needs of your community. Matching funds need to add up to 50% of the total funds requested. These must be committed to your program by the application deadline, but they can flow into the community at any point over the course of the project. Funds may entirely come from in-kind or cash contributions. Capital work such as putting in a sidewalk within the school zone cannot, however, be counted towards the matching funds. A priority area for this fund is to leverage resources and support long-term program sustainability. Due to this, matching funds must come from sources not already committed to active school travel prior to the initiatives. For example, if a staff member is currently spending 1 day a week on active school travel, any additional hours or days that goes towards the proposed initiative would count as an in-kind contribution. Now on to your project plan. When evaluating the project plan, reviewers will look at whether the key objectives are clearly articulated and whether they're reasonable and how they relate to the overall objectives of the Ontario Active School Travel Fund. Your project plan may change as your project unfolds. At this stage, you are required to put forward your best estimate. This is not a rigid plan, but still please take time to craft your plan. As you develop your project plans, think about the resources like personnel and facilities that you need to complete deliverables on time. You will also need to consider risks to completing deliverables and how you may mitigate these risks. Be sure to keep in mind the key activities such as progress reports, classroom student travel surveys, storytelling, and an environmental policy scan that must be completed, and possibly school board ethics applications as well. The evaluation plan builds on the objectives identified in your project plan. You will be generating goals related to these objectives and start to think about how you will measure performance. You will need to evaluate processes like program delivery, as well as outcomes such as changes in active travel. As you are putting together this plan, consider how you will share project results and lessons learned with stakeholders like families, teachers, and municipalities. This is essentially a brief outline for a dissemination plan that successful recipients will be expanding upon in their progress reports. The final section in the application form is the sustainability plan. Reviewers will look at how your initiatives will be supported in the long term. How will you support schools and communities in January 2021 and beyond? Are your plans realistic and well-defined? Are potential alternate sources of funding identified? Although the sustainability plan is listed at the end of the application form, it is weighted heavily on the overall ranking of your application. We suggest you spend time with the key members of your team and project partners to develop a solid sustainability plan. That's the end of the application form. All 7 sections explained in a nutshell. I'm now going to hand it back over to Kate.
All right, thank you, Selena. Just bear with us while we switch our screens. Okay, so we're almost at the Q&A session. We've had a few questions already coming in. Before we do that, I just wanted to highlight some of the information that's available to help you with your application. We've already given you a lot of information just in the last few minutes, but there is lots more on the fund web pages. So we encourage you to regularly review and digest the contents. There you will find the program guide and the frequently asked questions, which is quite extensive. There is also a fantastic short video that was produced by the Thunder Bay project. We recommend you watch that. It's a really great summary of the spirit and goals of this fund. We will also be posting the recording of this webinar on the fund webpage at the end of this week. And we are going to be adding some other additional materials to help you prepare a great proposal. We're going to add an About the Fund brochure sheet. So it's a very simple kind of one-pager marketing tool if you're looking to help get more project partners on board. It should help you do that. There'll also be a quick guide with the key factors to success for projects. We'll be putting that up at the end of this, probably at the end of this week. And that's based on the evaluation work from the previous rounds of the fund. We will email all of you, all webinar attendees, at the end of this week with links to these resources and to the recording of the webinar. So keep an eye on your mailbox. We will be in touch to make sure that you have access to all of these useful resources. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. And so we now have about 25 minutes available for questions and answers. We've had a few questions coming in, so we've been collating those into a Google document. So I will put that up on the screen now and we'll see what we've got. Please continue to use the chat box for additional questions and there are any comments and discussion. So I'll share that screen, Selena, if that's good, as I have that ready. Okay. So here we go. These are our questions that we have so far. First question was from Darren Winger. Darren, you asked, how can implementation be until June 2022, but final report due March 2022? How can you have final results? Well, that's a fair question. The reason that we have to have final reports in March is that that ties in with our reporting requirements to the Ministry of Education, which is governed by like fiscal year end. And we don't want to restrict project implementation to have to end in March. We want projects to be able to run to the end of the school year. So you're able to do that. You can keep working through to the end of the school year, but we do need the reporting in March. And we expect, based on experience, that the data that we collect in March will be reasonably final. Some of the key metrics that we're collecting is things like the number of schools that have participated, number of students, number of activities and initiatives. So we don't expect those things to change significantly between March and June. Okay. Second question was from Naluka. Hi, Naluka. Can there be a regional upper tier municipality and local municipality? Yes, certainly. So a municipality can be a lead applicant and can be a project partner, and that can be at any level of municipality, whether that's upper tier, like a regional municipality, a single tier, like a city, or lower tier, such as a town or a township. And ideally, we, as I said, the fund supports initiatives at a regional and community scale. So having multiple municipalities involved and collaborating and partnering and working together is very beneficial. So it's good to see that happen. And we certainly have examples from the previous round of the fund where that has happened. We've had different levels of municipal governance involved in a project. So we certainly encourage that to happen. Okay, third question from Wilke KA. Would an application from the same community be considered if it were for different school boards? No, so we use the community as being the defining criteria for whether we can accept an application, and we can only accept one application for the same community, regardless of who is the project lead. We're really looking for collaboration between stakeholders to happen at the community level, and so we expect you to have those conversations and establish what is the best approach for your community amongst the relevant stakeholders. We've designed this funding to really push different stakeholders to work together. If we receive more than one application from the same community, we would be sending that back to the applicants and asking you to get together and agree which single application will be the one for your community. So we strongly encourage you to reach out and talk to the partners to decide, in a single community, what is your strategy, what is going to be your project. Okay, the fourth question there is from Jen. Are there any examples of projects that have incorporated private organizational support to augment programming? And so you're giving an example of bike shops providing education, or companies that want to be seen as a community leader donating equipment. Yes, that is allowed to have those partners involved in your project. Private organizations, that's fine. Also, they're not able to be a project lead, but they can participate and support your project. They can contribute financially or in kind through staff time or equipment or materials or space to use or food, gift cards, other contributions to things like prizes and helping to support events. So yes, that is fine for that to happen, and it's great to be able to involve private organizations from your community in your project. Okay, and then the fifth question we have here was from Jay Porter. Can a school that is still in the planning stage be a candidate for a project? So I asked for a little bit more explanation on this. So you're referring to a school that is in the site planning stage. This school doesn't actually exist. It's a new elementary. So it's kind of on paper, on plan at this stage. Yes, I think that, I mean, really, you're not able to involve the school itself in the project, but certainly this kind of issue is very relevant to active school travel, and it's particularly relevant to priority area number 3 of those 4 priority areas for this fund. So that's developing policy and procedures. I think, you know, this really comes down to, you know, what is the existing policy in this community and how could that be improved? How could you make the case for in policy and planning terms for designing this new school to really support active travel modes? So certainly, yes, that that would be a relevant component, an eligible component of a project in fulfilling priority area number 3. Okay, so that is all of our questions that we've received so far. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to add, ask, contribute? Please use the chat box. We still have a good sort of 15 minutes if we have other things we want to talk through. We'll give you a few minutes to think up more questions. And if we don't have any, maybe we could watch the Thunder Bay video, Selena. So we will update our frequently asked questions to cover the ones that have been asked today, if they're not already in there. I can show you that on the screen. So our frequently asked questions are here on the round 3 page, and they're quite extensive now. So I encourage you to look through those, and I'd hope that you find most of the answers to your questions. Okay, so we just had a couple more questions coming in. So from Sarah, your question is there a ratio of cash to in-kind contributions that you are seeking? No, there is no requirement on the ratio between cash and in-kind for matching funding contributions. So you could have 100% in-kind, you could have 100% cash, or anywhere in between. Obviously, we just set the minimum percentage of matching funding required. And we've seen some really great levels of response and contributions in the past. So I think, you know, there's lots of ways to contribute to your project in kind as well as in cash. And a question from Michael Longfield. Are there flags or concerns about launching a project when there might be whether it has a strong advocacy component? So your example is Toronto, temporary bike lanes and pushing to keep and expand those at council. I mean, that specific example, Michael, of bike lanes, I mean, I think it'd need to be, you know, like heavily tied to school travel for that to be relevant. So my immediate response was that doesn't fit strongly within the 4 priority areas for this fund in terms of whether, you know, it's whether it's school travel planning or stakeholder partnerships, policy, or building public and political support for active school travel. So I think, you know, you'd have to really look at how strongly does that tie to school travel and active school travel in in that community if you're thinking in Toronto. I can advise you that Toronto was a recipient of the fund in round 2. So it has already received funding and wouldn't be eligible to apply to round 3 for a Toronto project. The project lead for that is Toronto Public Health and the City of Toronto. So if you want more information on that, we can follow up with you to provide you with the information about the Toronto project. Okay, question from Jose. Hi, Jose. What is the platform for the provincial network that was mentioned? So the Ontario Active School Travel Network, we use slack.com as the platform, as for the discussion forum for the network. And we also maintain an email list so that we can send out information to all network members too. But the primary mode of communication for network members is the slack.com platform. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Does anyone else have any final questions or thoughts? I think I will, I'll just stop sharing this Q&A document for now and go back to our slides. Okay, so if we don't have any more questions coming in right now, we will set up to play the Thunder Bay video, so you can stick around to watch that. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in today. We hope that you will be considering putting together an application for round 3 of the Ontario Active School Travel Fund, and we look forward to seeing those and working with you in the future. So thanks very much. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.